Imagine a nation at war, a world at war, and a gridiron clash for the ages. The 1941 NFL Championship wasn't just a game, but a symbol of the American spirit. How did the mighty Chicago Bears dominate this fateful season with a title victory for the history books? What stories lie beneath the headlines of that era? Join us as we tackle these questions and more. And our special guest, NFL historian Jeff Berckes from the Windy City Gridiron and Second City Gridiron for an inside look at the championship, forged in a nation's defining moment. And you won't want to miss this. And it's all coming up with Jeff in just a moment.
This is the Pigskin Daily History Dispatch, a podcast that covers the anniversaries of American football events throughout history. Your host, Darren Hayes, is podcasting from America's North Shore to bring you the memories of the gridiron, one day at a time.
Hello, my football friends. This is Darren Hayes of pigskindispatch.com. Welcome once again to the Pig Pen, your portal to positive football history. And welcome to championship year. We are talking about the NFL championships before the Super Bowl. We are all the way up in the 1941 season. And we have a returning guest who is going to talk about the Chicago Bears once again. Jeff Berckes, welcome back to the Pig Pen.
Thanks, Darren. I appreciate it. Really looking forward to what I think might be the best team in Chicago Bears history.
Well, that is quite a bit to say, because last time you were on, you talked about the Bears, having the most dominant victory in NFL history over the Washington Redskins, which we just played some previews of that before coming in the intro. So how please tell us about how the Bears were the most dominant team in 1941.
It's really interesting. I don't want to blow my notes that I want to build up to a little bit, but this to me is the year that changes the NFL forever. That's what I'm going to try to convince you by the end of this episode.
Okay, challenge is on. Let's do it.
All right, so 1941, I think, brings modern offense to the NFL. So you've got the 73-0 game that we talked about at the end of the year. There's probably still plenty of doubters, right? Like the Bears were just a good team going into that game. Maybe there's a lot of reasons that something like that could happen. But when you have a sustained dominance like you have in 1941 and 1942, this is when I think things change in the NFL forever for the better. And so I think we're going to find, I'm gonna have some numbers in this episode that I think you're going to find convincing.
Okay.
So if you listen to the 1940 episode, they have basically the same team. George Musso, Joe Stidehar, Danny Fortman, Bulldog Turner, all on the line. Those four Hall of Famers that are on the line, which is kind of incredible. You'd love to have that in any era.
Right.
Sid Luckman's now kind of entering the prime of his career. This is his third year. He's figured out the T formation. George Halas says it takes 3 years to really learn the T. Here he is in the third year, right? So he starts to take off. Bill Osmanski's still there. George McAfee's still there. So you've got, great backfield components there. Ken Kavanaugh, one of the best ends in the league. No significant losses. We talked about automatic Jack Manders, maybe the most significant loss. Not a particularly strong draft. There's only one Hall of Famer from the 1941 draft, just, kind of as a note. But the Bears do add Norm Standley from Stanford, and he'll play a role in the championship game. He only plays 1 year, leaves for the war in 1942, and when he returns, he actually goes and plays for San Francisco in the AAFC, and then eventually when they come into the NFL. Hugh Gallarneau, he's a Stanford halfback. I mentioned him because behind me, if you're watching video, he's actually the player who's wearing number 8 in this great program cover. So this is a program cover of Bears Packers. All of these are actual program covers behind me, drawn, illustrated by one artist. His name's Jerry Keefe. I mention this because I did a story on Jerry and Chicago Bears artwork a couple years ago. One of my favorite stories that I've ever written, researched, just a really fun history article. It's pinned to my Twitter account. You can find me at Gridironborn, or you can just Google my name and Windy City Gridiron with brushstrokes of genius, I believe is what I called it, or Jerry Keefe, and you'll get that hit. But some really cool artwork, and it was fun to find out who the players were that were wearing the different jersey numbers that this guy drew in on some of these players. So anyway, I wanted to mention Hugh, and then I also want to mention Chuck and Charlie O'Rourke. He's a quarterback who he set the rookie record, Chicago Bears record for touchdown passes as a rookie. That was only just broken by Caleb Williams this past year.
Wow.
So he was drafted in
84
41.
years later.
Yeah, I mean it's unreal. So he was drafted in 41. He did not play at all. So his rookie year was actually 1942. But again, he was drafted in 41. So I just wanted to mention that. Served in World War II, notice a theme there. And then when he came back, he played for the LA Dons in the AAFC and then backed up Y.A. Tittle for the Colts. So, bounced around a little bit, but, had a very interesting record for the Bears for quite a while. Darren, the thing that you got to know about the 41 Bears is that they finished the regular season with a point differential of plus 249, which was a league record at the time. They would beat that record in 1942 with plus 292. This is in 11 games.
Yeah, I was going to say, these are much shorter seasons than we're used to now.
They averaged 36 points per game.
Jeez, that's pretty good.
And that's a new league record. In 1942, they averaged 34.2 points per game. At the time, a team would average about 11 or 12 points a game. That's all through the 30s. That's essentially what football was. Each side averaged somewhere in 11 to 12. Yeah, you get a random 28-point game or something like that. But over the long term, teams scored about 11 or 12 points a game at this point. So to hop this up from 11 or 12 all the way up to 36 points a game in 1941 is pretty amazing. By the end of the 1940s, everyone has adopted the T formation man in motion, and teams are averaging 22 to 23 points per game. So, and that's essentially where we're at today. If you see through the history of the league, you see that the points per game essentially has been about that since after the Bears T formation man in motion became what everybody ran by the end of the 1940s. So this is the most significant offensive NFL innovation because we now enter modern scoring. It really hasn't changed. It's gone down a little bit, like in the 70s, that kind of, and then it slowly slugged out in the 80s, which is where, the era that I grew up in. And, we see a lot of points today, but it's essentially what it was back, after this offensive innovation took fold. And then Darren, I want to continue my point here by trying to impress upon you just how impressive 36 and 34 points per game, 34.2 points per game are. Care to take a guess where that would rank all time for a single season average points per game mark?
Well, I have to tell you, last week I ran an infograph on this on High Scores team, and I missed the 1941 Bears, so I apologize. I may have to correct some things here, but I do know that there's modern teams that are in the top 10, but it's not a modern team that is the top spot. And I'll let you go ahead and
I'll run through them. So,
okay.
So the Bears, the 1942, I'll go bottom to top. That's fun. That's more fun for a list.
Okay.
So the 1942 Bears are actually 10th all time. For 34.2. Interestingly enough, and that'll be the next episode, they lost in the championship, but that is what it is.
Now, are these postseason and regular season?
This is just regular season because that's how most of those are tracked through that, right? So 1942 Bears, 34.2 points. They lost their championship game. The 2011 Saints, 34.2 as well. They lost in the divisional round to San Francisco. The 1998 Vikings, 34.8. They lost the NFC Championship game to the Falcons. The 2012 Pats, 34.8 points per game. They lost the AFC Championship game to the Ravens, the Joe Flacco elite year. The 2011 Packers, they averaged 35. They lost the divisional round to the Giants, who ended up going on winning that one. 2018 Chiefs, 35.3 points per game, lost in the AFC Championship game to Tom Brady's Pats. 1941 Bears in the number 4 spot, 36 points per game. They are the only team on this list to win the championship.
Hmm.
The 2007 Pats at 36.8 points per game lost the Super Bowl to the Giants. The 2013 Broncos had 37.9 points. They lost their Super Bowl to Seattle. And then the 1950 Rams, 38.8 points per game. They're the top team. But here's the thing. 1950, right at the end of the 1940s, right? Who are they coached by? Do you know who the coach?
Was it Shaughnessy, wasn't it?
Shaughnessy's coached in 48 and 49. And then
Okay.
Shaughnessy gave so there's the Bears connection. Shaughnessy gives way to Joe Stidehar, Bears Hall of Fame tackle.
Okay.
He's the coach in 50 and 51. The Rams win in 51. So he takes over for Shaughnessy. And then another person that was on his staff is Hampton Poole, who we talked about last episode having a pick six that kind of broke the game, in that 73-0 game, made it 35-0. So you have these Bears disciples that are over with the Rams and running Los Angeles. So again, like the the 41 and the 42 teams are two of the top 10 scoring offenses of all time because of this offensive innovation.
And that is amazing. And I missed the Bears 41, so I apologize. I'm gonna have to redo my infographic. I even included AFC teams and AFL teams in here. And there's only two that made that. The 48 49ers were 35.35 points per game regular season. The 61 Oilers in the AFL were 36.64. So that shows you how impressive the Bears are among the three more modern leagues of scoring.
Now, I did see the Oilers. I decided to not include them because they were AFL. But yes, like, I mean, even so, even if you say, well, they've got two of the top 12, in the expanded look, it's still really impressive that these two
most definitely.
years are ridiculous. And then when you consider what happened in the end of this year, which we'll get to in a minute, and what happened with guys leaving for the war. I mean, McAfee leaves in 42, so you don't have your Swiss Army knife. Who's probably your best skill player. You don't have him for 42. There's a lot of other guys that start leaving, including Hallis. So you don't have your master tactician at the helm either. So there's I think some reasons why the Bears don't complete that three-peat. There's some reasons why the Bears, aren't competitive in 43 and 44, right? Like there's some reasons here. And so, there's that what if that's, I think, very interesting for football historians. Like, would the league eventually catches up, right? Like innovation has a first mover advantage. Eventually everybody else catches up. They get the right personnel. They learn it, but Hallis says it takes 3 years to learn the T, right? So if you take that at its word, once you convert over, it's going to take you about 3 years to master it. So, there is some cause here to think that, the Bears probably missed out on some titles that they may have otherwise won if they would have been able to remain full strength, and everybody remained full strength until the league caught up with them.
Yeah, that's some excellent points, but it sort of broke up that dynasty with the war, and it's a shame because who knows where they might have gone with that. They could be, ultimately historic here. You'd be, it could be the most wins in a row for championships, and it's unfortunate.
So let's dig into 41 a little bit. They only lose one game, 14-16 against the Packers. Otherwise, they run the table. They're 10-1. They did need to win. They went into their last game. They needed to win it against the Cardinals. Usually played the crosstown Chicago Cardinals, the last game of the year. The game, the date is a date that most people would know, even if they don't care about football. It is December 7th, 1941. What happened December 7th, 1941 that most people would know about?
It's a day that lived in infamy.
It's a day that lived in infamy, right? And it's not because the Chicago Bears were victorious in a football game against their crosstown rival Cardinals. It's because the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor. And the press box starts to learn about this attack about around halftime of this game. So the players don't know, at least in my research, the players aren't finding out about this. The fans aren't finding out about this. You don't have a cell phone, right? No one's calling
Mhm.
you, or texting you like, hey, you'll never believe what happened. People are living in, like, ignorance and bliss, probably watching a football game here. And the Bears are able to take care of business. A little iffy, for a while. The first half's, pretty competitive, but the Bears are able to take care of business and basically they share the Western Conference title with the Packers. So they have to play a playoff game to determine who will play the championship. So I can only imagine. I mean, I'm 43 years old. I was in college in 9/11. I remember how I felt when that happened. I remember going to a class the next day and just, am I supposed to go to class? Are we doing, what is, what's happening here? And I can only imagine that's a similar feeling to what people felt in 1941 after Pearl Harbor. Like, what's happening? I
Right.
believe the NFL delayed a week, 9/11, if I remember that correctly. But here they
Yeah, I
didn't.
think you're right.
They went forward and they played this football game against the Packers to determine the Western Conference champion. Bears don't have a problem here. They easily handle the Packers. It's 33-14. It's not a particularly exciting game. Again, this is a very dominant team. They had one blip. Packers were a good team, right? Bears
Mhm.
were a great team. And they take care of them, no problem. So they're going to play New York. 1941 championship game. It's remembered as a blowout. It's not 73 to nothing. It's remembered as a blowout because it's 37-9. But it was pretty competitive early. Went to half. Giants are down 3. They come out. They tie it with a field goal. It's 9-9. Early third quarter. But it's a cold day. There's not a lot of fans there. It's pretty drab. I think you can imagine it has a lot to do with 2 weeks after the attack.
Mhm.
Americans are trying to figure out what's happening. A lot of people are already signing up to enter the armed services. There's just a lot of momentum going on. Who cares about a football game, right? But the Bears really, their offense gets it together in the second half. They wake up. Norm Stanley, mentioned him, his 1 year with the Bears. He gets it going in the third quarter, scores a couple touchdowns. He finishes the day with 89 yards rushing, the 2 scores, and another 34 yards receiving. McAfee essentially has the same stat line, 123 scrimmage yards and 1 touchdown. Ken Kavanaugh kind of closes it out with a scoop and score, fumble return for a touchdown. So, it ends up lopsided. Giants turn the ball over a bunch in the second half, including 3 interceptions. Stanley has an interception. Danny Fortman, my guy. Danny Fortman's one of my favorite players, from a historical perspective. I love the story. I love that he, was a doctor and, did the, medic in the World War II and then came back and was a
Mhm.
team. I just love all of that about him. But I
Right.
love the undersized guard. And, that was the position I played. Not undersized. I was
It,
properly sized when I
he's
played.
relatable
He's relatable
to
to me, right? Like
right. Yeah. So it's all of us. Yeah. He's relatable.
he's the guy that I really like reading about the most. And then Bulldog Turner. So back-to-back championship games, Bulldog Turner has an interception. So I think that's worth mentioning here. I think if you're going to give an MVP, it probably goes to the rookie Stanley, just because he's able to have a couple touchdowns and gets a turnover and really broke the game open. So it probably goes to him. And so I think this, just the interesting thing about 41 is that it's at the time, I think it was probably pretty like, man, Bears are really good, right? Like
Mhm.
they walk through, they handle both their playoff games. It's really impressive. But I think it's even more impressive when you have 100+ years of history and you're able to really look at the numbers and say, well, this is what caused the spike. This changed offenses because you see the average points per game move up, and you got the war years, and that's weird, and it really impacts football. But if you see by the end of the 40s that now we've arrived, and when the 1950 starts, this is where offense is until the modern day.
Yeah, that's I mean, I don't have the statistics, but I can only imagine, after that 1940 game with the T formation winning that championship, okay, probably a few coaches at other levels, the college and high school levelers are saying, "Hey, let's learn a little bit about this T formation. Maybe we'll implement it." Well, after this, 2 years in a row of dominating the highest level of football, you know, these folks are probably, packing classrooms and, on field practice fields everywhere, learning this T formation from that Shaughnessy and Hallis really made something really special out of. So
Well,
yeah,
and
I've
you'll hear clips with Luckman talk about, oh, I went here to teach so and so the T, and
mhm.
I have a book from Leahy from Notre Dame, and about the T, so eventually Notre Dame picks it up, right? And this is interesting, is that Notre Dame has Johnny Lujack, and he's running this, and Hallis drafts Johnny Lujack to be Luckman's successor, and he is for a couple years, but then he drifts off because he's got other options. So another theme that we talked about last time with Bronco Nagurski, essentially Johnny Lujack does the same thing to Hallis, that Nagurski did, which he had better options, and so he took them as opposed to taking a pay cut or not getting the raise that he thought he deserved. Um, I went through and just did some math just because it's fun.
Mhm.
And I think if and I always I'm saying this with please take this for what it is, and I know that I'm drawing lines in a very convenient way. But from the 1940 championship game, 73-0 game, until the last regular season game in 1942, the Chicago Bears were 24-1. Their one loss against the Packers, that 16-14. They scored 915 points. They gave up 254. So that is a plus 661
Wow.
point differential. So if you take out the one loss, so in those 24 wins, their average margin of victory during this run was 27.6 points per game.
Jeez, Louise.
So this is what I mean by this is the most dominant team, I think, in NFL history. Like I don't think that it has a comparison, because of what they're able to do, and then because they're so dominant, everybody adopts this. And by the end of the decade, everybody's caught up. So did the Bears get enough championships for this innovation? They got 4. That's pretty great, right? You'll hear about a
Hmm.
couple more, from my colleague here in a few weeks, a little teaser. That's pretty great. I think, you certainly take that deal nowadays, right? With how competitive the league is. But even then, I think that's still pretty good. They probably would have had more had the war not interrupted them, but it's just an amazing run. I mean, 25 games is, that's about 1 year plus a little bit now. And back then it's essentially 2 years. But it's an incredible run for the Bears. And, there's a reason why the Bears have the most Hall of Fame players of all time. One, they've been around forever. And two, so many of these guys were in this era, and really, set the course for the modern NFL.
Well, very, very well said. And yeah, I don't think anybody that knows the football history and professional football history can argue any of that. Definitely one of the most dominant teams in history of the NFL. And you convinced me. You challenged me at the beginning. You were going to convince me they were one of the most dominant teams in NFL history. And I think you've convinced myself and the listeners here of that. So great, great job on that. Uh, I became familiar a little bit of your work. This is my big segue into having you introduce some of your podcasts. But I became introduced to you. Alluded to it earlier. We're going to have your colleague Jack Silverstein on here in a couple of weeks to talk about some more of the Bears championships. And I heard an episode of you and him from a few years ago on Johnny Lujack. And it
Oh,
was it was phenomenal. And folks, and I've listened to more than just that one, but that one really struck a chord with me. I'm a Notre Dame fan, in Pennsylvania, but so Lou Jack was an interesting person to me, especially we just lost him not too long ago, and just had a brilliant career in college and that brief stint in the NFL. But you guys made it very entertaining, and maybe you could tell us a little bit about your podcast that you're on and your writing and where people can listen and read your items.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you for that. That means a lot. I texted Jack after Johnny Lujack passed, and I said, "Do you want to hop on and do a tribute podcast?" Because I think that he's just someone that was so long ago that most Bears fans don't know the impact of who he is and what he was able to do for the Bears. And I think he's just a really interesting person to highlight. Seemed like a really cool guy too. Like able to watch some videos of him, and as an older guy, lived to be a very ripe old age. So, so that was pretty recent that we did that. But that would have been on the Second City Gridiron, which is the podcast and YouTube channel that I own, co-own with my partner Lester A. Wiltfong Jr. He's also my podcast co-host for Bear and Balance. That's the one, our flagship. I also will just do random series that I find interesting, right? So, last year I did a series on Hard Knocks. I've done something called the Hopium Den, where I talk to a bunch of different fans that come at it from different angles. I did a history podcast called Hallis to Mac, which Chicago Bears history by the decade. It was one episode per decade. We went through the entire history of the Bears. I love football. I find it interesting, and I find no limits to my work. I think that the history part's cool. I think the stats part is great. I have a science background, so that's a pretty natural fit to me. I played through high school, tried to go to a small college before I got hurt, so I, understand the X's and O's a little bit. So for me, it's like I'm the utility infielder for Windy City Gridiron, where I write, and Second City Gridiron, where I talk about football. And that's where you can find me, just trying to mix it up and find some interesting stories and angles to tell.
All right. Well, folks, if you're driving, we'll put the links to Jeff's work in both the podcast notes and the YouTube show notes. You can find him easy when you're at your convenience. And I definitely recommend you listening and reading his work. So, great job, Jeff. We really appreciate you coming on here, sharing this era of Chicago Bears history between these two podcasts you've done back to back for us. Really appreciate your time today and your hard work and research.
Yeah, Darren, absolutely. Thank you for having me on. And I really appreciate that you are doing this. I think this is really cool to talk about this era. And I think that we as fans sometimes think that NFL started in Super Bowl I, and it did not. There's a lot of really cool and fun stuff to learn about, interesting characters all throughout NFL's history. So it's a really great thing that you're doing.
Well, thank you. And we'll hope to have you on again sometime here to talk about some of your other work. And because like you, we're kindred spirits. I always like to do some crazy things about football and look at all aspects of it. And this series is just one of those kind of things. So we appreciate you being a part of it.
Thanks, Darren. Appreciate it.
That's all the football history we have today, folks. Join us back tomorrow for more of your football history. We invite you to check out our website, pigskindispatch.com, not only to see the daily football history, but to experience positive football with our many articles on the good people of the game, as well as our own football comic strip, Cleat Marks Comics. Pigskindispatch.com is also on social media outlets, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and don't forget the Pigskin Dispatch YouTube channel to get all of your positive football news and history. Special thanks to the talents of Mike and Gene Monroe, as well as Jason Neff for letting us use their music during our podcast.
This podcast is part of the Sports History Network, your headquarters for the yesteryear of your favorite sport. You can learn more at sportshistorynetwork.com.